welcome to the Learning Experience powered by CAST. I'm one of your hosts, Kelli Suiting.
And I'm Luis Perez.
And I'm Bryan Dean.
We are three educators here ready to break down barriers until learning has no limits. Let's do this. Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Learning Experience, where we believe access is not just an add-on, it's where great learning begins. And today is one of our favorite episodes of the year because we are celebrating Global Accessibility Awareness Day, or GAAD. And it's the day that we pause to really notice the design decisions that either open the doors or quietly closes them. So it's really a time to be very intentional about those design options. And of course, I'm here with my co-host. Hey guys, always happy to share the same space with you.
Hello, hello.
Yo, yo, yo. You can tell it's been Bryan and I are letting it go a little bit because he's got a little bit more gray in his beard and my beard is longer than it usually is. So
I know.
You know, we're just chilling, enjoying the spring.
Right. I have had a lot of work time with Kelli lately, so I'm kind of attributing that to the gray in the beard.
Oh, the gray.
I mean,
hair?
I mean it as I have to become a little more distinguished.
You
Not
definitely
that I'm
do look
stressed.
more distinguished, Bryan.
thank you.
It looks like you're about to break out into a lecture, at a university, probably
Yeah.
like an, older university. You're all
Well, you're
set.
just buttering me up today. I mean, I'm loving it. Do I owe you money? If I do,
No.
I'll send it your way.
He's just trying to impress our wonderful guest that we're
That's
going to
right.
be introducing soon, and I don't blame him. And friends, you always hear they have hair envy. That's
I
all
do.
it is.
That's
So
what it is.
It
Absolutely.
I do. I do. I absolutely do. How is everybody though? Everybody how's everybody feeling? Good?
yeah, feeling
Yeah?
good. I'm glad
You guys
to
have
be.
been out and about as always. So I'm always interested in hearing about your adventures coming back in. And I'm over
Yeah.
here just trying to hang on like a hubcap in the fast lane. You know what I mean? I'm just, trying to make it work.
Well,
Yeah,
Kelly's been logging the miles. She's been all over
Have been.
Utah.
Yeah,
New
Utah,
York.
New York, the Canada
Mhm.
soon. Yeah,
Mhm.
and let's just say that traveling is not for the weak, let me tell you.
No, it is not.
Yeah, it is exhausting. But see how we can just get off topic?
That's
It's not
right.
really a topic, but it's all going to work out because we're getting ready to introduce our guest today. But
Ooh, I'm excited.
gentlemen, I want to try
Yes.
something with you both before we start. All
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
So
Let's do it.
I want you both to think about the last time you said the words, "Oh, that's helpful." Or maybe you noticed something that made an impact, or maybe became a barrier. And it doesn't necessarily have to be accessibility related. So just something in your day where you thought, wow, that's actually made things easier.
Do you want to
Go
go,
ahead.
Bryan?
No, well, I have one, but I always want to defer to you.
Well, since this is an accessibility focus episode, it happened to me this morning
Okay.
because I just got a new camera. And I really believe that everything that you use, all of the tools that you use, should be accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And my new camera has a screen reader.
Oh,
Well, that's
yeah.
cool.
And so I turned it on and I was like, wow, this is not only going to be helpful for me, but there's a lot of older people that get into photography, right?
Yeah,
And
for sure.
but not only that, often you're photographing out in the environment, right? And you
Mhm.
might have some really harsh sunlight that might keep you from being able to see things on the screen.
Mhm.
And now I can set up a button where I can turn on a screen reader and have those menus read out loud. So, that really is our philosophy. Essential for some. For me, it's essential. Like, I won't be able to do my photography much longer if I don't have that accessibility feature, but it's helpful for a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's helpful for those people that are older or those that are using a camera in an environment where they can't look at the screen. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a game changer. So
Yeah, that's
Oh,
very
wow.
results will
cool.
speak for themselves.
Yeah, I
Right.
love that. Louise, was it hard to get used to right away?
No, it's really intuitive. Part of it is because I've been a screen reader user for many,
Yeah.
many years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just coming to a new device, right? A new
Yeah.
technology or tool that I use. And so I would love to see that, like screen readers everywhere, basically. TVs, cable
Mm-hmm.
devices, whatever
Yeah.
you use should have a screen reader in it.
Yeah, for sure.
Love
I
it.
agree. Mine is not as cool as that or as topical, I guess. But I will tell you, one of my favorite things that has ever been designed is the new ketchup bottle. Now, it's been out for a long time, but it is one of my favorite things. It is one of those things that is incredibly useful, right? Because if you remember back in the day when you had glass ketchup bottle, it was really hard to get the ketchup out. And so then they said,
Okay.
let's turn it into a squeeze bottle. And they did, but it was still kind of problematic. And then by one little change, by putting the cap on the bottom and making it be able to stand up that way, you no longer have to shake it. You can
Yeah.
still squeeze it. Like it is just one little change in design that is so intentional that it makes it incredibly useful. I don't
So
eat
I
a lot of ketchup, but I think it's like a really cool design.
I got a follow up for you, Brian, and you
Mm.
may alienate some people in the Philadelphia area, but
Yeah.
Oh,
on cheesesteaks, ketchup, yay or nay?
No,
oh
no
boy.
ketchup on cheesesteak. What are you talking about? And I'm not a believer on ketchup on hot dogs either. What are you talking about?
You just
That's mustard. You put mustard on a hot dog, and you don't put ketchup on a cheesesteak. Come
All
on,
right, Philly fans, you can
come
just
on.
send hate mail to Brian. You can
there you
leave it
go.
out of my mailbox.
You just
Yeah,
have
it's
ketchup on
El
top.
Perret. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my gosh. You know, it's so nostalgic when you said that because I remember just pounding that glass ketchup bottle on the palm of your hand trying to get that out.
Right?
So now you just gave me my own sort of like, you know what? That does make things easier.
Yeah, it makes
So
it a huge difference, right?
yeah, it
That's
does.
right.
There
Yeah.
you go.
I would say I just bought a new clicker for presenting, and then it has a magnifier on it. And I
Mm,
was at a recent conference and on the stage and the screen was really high. And so I had certain parts that I really wanted to, I couldn't point out, which I maybe typically would and describe. And so that magnifier just kind of magnified the spot where I wanted it to. And I was like, gosh, this makes it a lot easier for me. And so
yeah,
I was just thinking about that. And I know Louise bought one also. We always,
Well,
I have
well, I
one
was
as
just
well.
gonna say told me, and like the next thing I know, I'm putting it on my Amazon cart. But
Yeah,
this is something we do. We make each other empty our wallets every once in a while
yep,
and
that's right.
buy things. So
yep.
I
Louise
as
got
and
long
I
as
have,
mine.
it's
I
useful.
got the same one, and I've got it in rose gold because I like to be fancy. I
nice.
like to look fancy up there.
Louise and I go back years, and I've spent a lot of money because of him, and vice versa. So, I do. I really like the ketchup bottle. I love the screen reader. I kind of would really like to see you do that, Louise. I am really intrigued by that
I'll
because I
take a
know
video
that's
of it.
yeah, because I know you've been talking about the need for that for a long time. But so those helpful moments turn out to be connected to accessibility in some way, even if it's the ketchup bottle, right? That's a part of accessibility because that's really what Global Accessibility Awareness Day or GAAD is about. It's about noticing how people experience information differently, noticing how design choices can make participation easier and not harder. And today we're talking with someone who has dedicated her career, like I'm not even kidding, so much that it's hot off the press that she is here now with her PhD, Dr. Wendy, to improving accessibility and expanding opportunities for others. I have used Wendy's work for years, and she vets a lot of materials. She has this great website. I can just go to it. I'm like, hey, did Wendy vet for this? And let me look at it. Am I going to use it or not? So it's a great resource. And so Dr. Wendy's in the house
Boom,
again.
boom, yay!
Welcome,
Hi,
welcome.
everyone. So I'm Dr. Wendy Torres, but it's an ED, not a PhD, but still a doctorate.
That's right. Okay.
Still
Either
doctor.
way,
Right?
that's right.
Still a doctorate.
ED. So yeah, I'm gonna call myself out. So Wendy's last name has rolled R's, and so my Midwestern accent has been fumbling me up a little bit. So I'm gonna go with Dr. Wendy, but and the guys are gonna make fun of me, and that's okay. But Wendy, Dr. Wendy, we are so excited to talk about your journey today into this work and what your research is teaching us and others, and how awareness can turn into meaningful action. And so GAAD is about building understanding and action around digital access. So we really would like to dive into more about you and what first drew you into the field of accessibility and what keeps you so passionate about the work today.
And we would love to hear your last name, Dr. Wendy.
That's right.
So my official last name is Velez-Torres, so it's two Spanish names. So my official name technically is Wendy Velez-Torres, but I go by Wendy. So nice, lovely Puerto Rican name there. But what's interesting with my journey with digital accessibility actually started over 20 years ago, and I didn't even realize I was on that journey. So I was a special educator, kind of brand new to the field, maybe 1 or 2 years in, so still fairly new. And I remember I have found this tool online that I just thought, oh, this is going to be cool. I can use this with my students. They're going to love it. And the next day I shared it with my students, and all my students loved it but one. One of my students had muscular dystrophy, so he could not navigate a mouse traditionally the way we would traditionally navigate one. he had to use a joystick to navigate. And that particular tool that I have found used only click and drag.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had no idea about that. And I remember he was upset. Like, I remember how upset he was because he was one of those students who was like, I want to do everything everybody else does. And so he had to rely on his aide to, actually engage with the tool. So he couldn't engage with the tool as everybody else. And so I remember how impacted me, because I remember the look on his face. And I remember I was like, I'm not sure what to do with this. And I had kind of like no idea that this was even a thing. Again, I was like brand new to the field. But then if you like fast forward several years later, I'm working at Coppin State University. I have, a young son that I just gave birth to, and he's diagnosed as autistic. And my boss says, we want to start looking at digital accessibility. And I started looking at, what that meant and looking at tools. And I started to encounter kind of the same things that Antonio had encountered.
Mm-hmm.
But my reaction is vastly different at this point. At this point, I'm like, it's been 20 years. What do you mean this hasn't been fixed? Like I was mad. I was angry that it wasn't fixed, because now it's impacting my son. And it impacted Antonio. And I should have had that reference then. But it's different when it's your own child. Because then I started looking at, well, now you're excluding my son. You're saying he's not welcome in this space. Why is this not accessible? And I started to really start diving in and looking at web tools, and I found out that how many of them were not accessible. I kind of took for granted, oh, it's on the web, it must be accessible. And you know what they say when you assume. But that's really what happened. I assumed it was, and it wasn't until I saw that it wasn't. And then I became mad because when I started looking at it, I'm like, this isn't really that difficult to do. And the fact that there was so much resistance when I would reach out to vendors, I would actually show vendors and say, I found this issue with your tool. Can you address it? Some were very open, and some were like, oh, we don't have disabled people who used it. And I remember feeling very angry by that response because it was so dismissive. And then I would, throw my son. And I'm like, so you mean my son's not welcome in this space? And it was, oh, we don't mean him. It was always somebody else they were talking about. And I was like, yeah, but you are saying that. Like, if he can't navigate this, if he can't use it, you're saying he's not welcome in this space. That he doesn't have the same equal rights as everyone else. And so I took it very personal. So it became this big passion for me because as a teacher, because I teach at the university now, but I'm working with new teachers as well. It's for me, we're reaching our students. And so when it's not accessible, we are not reaching our students. We're not reaching that barrier. And so when I was doing this with Antonio, I was the barrier. I had created the barrier. His disability wasn't the barrier. He was perfectly capable of doing what I was asking him to do. It was what I had introduced didn't allow him to fully participate. And so I was like, okay, so I remembered that. And so that's always what drives me now.
That's awesome. And it's often the case, right? That there's a personal experience that really kind of opens our eyes to what the world could be, what it isn't, and what could be. And I think something that stood out from your response, the idea of equal rights, because that's really what it's about, right? It's the equal rights to participation, to contribute, and so on. And like you said, it's been 36 years since the ADA was enacted, right? So it's about time. And, we've had some exciting progress with Title II updated rule, Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which deals with state and local government. And we see a lot of awareness around accessibility that we hadn't seen in the past. But often we have to go back to the basics. So accessibility and access, right? Access more generally, people throw around these words, right? And they may mean different things when they say access, right? So can you get us started here with just a quick definition? What does accessibility, how would you define it? And what does it really mean for like everyday learning, for work, for digital environments, especially? Because we rely on digital environments for so much, right? From services to learning to work. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So yeah, access and accessibility do get used interchangeably a lot of times, but as I often tell people, they're not the same thing. So having access just means, okay, I can get to it, but having accessibility means I can use it and navigate it and understand it. So if you're thinking of a physical space, okay, having access means maybe there's a ramp that lets me into the actual location, but then when I get to the location, am I able to actually actively participate? So maybe I can get into the concert, but if I can't see the venue or I can't engage with anybody because I'm in an isolated location, am I really fully participating? So when you think of digital accessibility in terms of like the digital space, that means anybody can go on a digital product and engage with it, navigate, and understand it at the exact same time as everybody else. So you don't have to wait for that. So if, for example, I just finished my doctorate, so if I'm doing my homework at 2 o'clock in the morning, everyone should be able to get on and do their homework at 2 o'clock in the morning. It shouldn't be an issue if I am a screen reader user and I have to wait on my instructor to make it accessible so I can read it. So I can have access to the same information. So that's what accessibility really is. I mean, that's what it means to me. It's that basically everyone can engage and participate, use these products, enjoy them, and fully participate without having to go the extra mile doing something extra. Because when you have to do something extra, it's not fully inclusion, and it actually can become very exhausting.
Wow, that's a great answer, and you gave me some flashbacks of being a doctoral student because we do a lot of our work at 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
With Pepsi and making sure
There's nobody to call at 2 in the morning. You just gotta have that access at that time, right? So that's a great example.
I really love it because I think that it frames it in this idea of empowerment and agency, right? For me to be able to, it's not me waiting on somebody. It's not me waiting at the table for somebody to tell me what I can eat. It's me choosing what I want to eat when I want to eat it, right? And I think that that's a huge part. Like that's a huge part of just who we are as humans, right? And so I do have this question as we're kind of moving on. So we know that Global Accessibility Awareness Day, it's coming up. It's and I'm not as hip as y'all, but let me make sure I got this right. It's usually the third Thursday in May, right? So this year, May 21st, right?
my graduation
All right.
day. Woohoo.
There you go. See, there's a reason why they scheduled
What a
it
way to
that
celebrate.
right?
No kidding.
But like GAAD usually like it highlights like technical fixes is what I have found. Like I'm not as in the accessibility world as both Louisa and Kelly, but from my outside observation, often what I see is that it's a lot of technical fixes like alt text, captioning, contrast, those sorts of things, which are hugely important. But when looking at your research and your focus really, and even just what you've said in the podcast so far, your focus is on the human side of the audit, right? How faculty development actually changes the digital landscape. And so as we look forward to GAAD 2026, how do we prevent accessibility from being just seen as a policing action or a compliance action, and more really in that reframing as a fundamental act of social justice that kind of honors the digital rights of every learner?
Yeah, so that's actually what my research really actually focused on. That's literally what I did with my faculty. We looked at their actual course, and we have a tool that we use that kind of gives a score for the content that they're sharing in their digital spaces. And so initially, the participants who were part of it were kind of thinking, "Oh, I want to be compliant. I want to make sure I
Yeah.
go for that Title II." And that's where their mindset was at the beginning of the research. However, at the end, we had a mind shift that happened, and basically what happened was I started to show them, okay, here's what the tool is saying. This is why this needs to be accessible, and I explained to them, okay, well, this is why this matters to specific individuals, why this is a barrier for certain people, and I started having them do it themselves. So what made it interesting was at first they kind of saw it as, oh, this is something extra. It's something not connected to good teaching. It's just something extra I have to do. It doesn't connect to my actual students. But when they started to see how easy it was to do, and then how it actually made their content look better and clearer for their students, they started to kind of a buy-in. And then when I started kind of telling, okay, this is why this is a barrier for this specific person. And I deliberately started to pick disabilities that we tend to think of as invisible, those ones that we can't physically see, because
Sure.
everybody always seems to focus on, I can physically see if you're blind, or I can physically see if you're in a wheelchair. I wanted to focus on things like, well, if I'm neurodiverse and I have, ADHD
Yeah.
or I have dyslexia, you don't know that. And the
Yeah.
majority of us aren't going to disclose that for whatever reason. And you can't assume that they're not in your classroom. So when you make it easier for them to engage with your content, you can focus more on the important part, which is the actual teaching. Like, what did they master instead of
Right.
them
Right.
wasting time writing you, I can't get to this, and waiting for you to respond. You can actually focus on what did you master in the materials. And so I found when my faculty started seeing that connection, when they started to see, oh, this makes my content look easier, this makes it easier and better, and this isn't that hard. Oh, I can reach different people this way. I started to have more buy-in. I actually had one of my participants we were working on a PowerPoint that he had. It was a very detailed PowerPoint. It taught like biochemistry, so lots of atoms and
Sure.
scientific
Technical
in
pieces.
that. And
Yeah.
so I was showing him how to do detailed alt text using AI tools.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling him, I was like, well, you know what? The alt text only has a certain amount of characters. I said, but since this is such a detailed um, image, this might be helpful if we just kind of copy that information and put in a Word document. Just say slide one has, descriptions for all of them. And just place it underneath the kind of that UDL principle.
Sure.
And so he did that because originally he was targeting, okay, I need this for my students who are blind. But then he wrote me and said, hey, we took a test this week and I made that available. And all my students actually did better on the test. And they actually wrote him and said, can you do that image description again for all the
Nice. Nice.
And so he made that connection like, oh, wait a minute, I wasn't even targeting these students, and yet they're saying that it helped them. And so I did that with my faculty. A lot of times I used myself as an example. So I was showing different tools that you can use, like Immersive Reader or something, because we have, within our learning management system, we have a tool that gives a lot of alternative formats automatically to our students. And so I was telling them, well, this was designed for someone who's dyslexic, but I use it all the time. I use myself as a doctoral student, saying, I'm exhausted. I don't want to read that article anymore.
Right.
Right.
I wrote
Right.
it so many times, I started to transpose things I thought I wrote in there. So
Right.
Use the reader to actually, read it to you. And then I used my son. I said, but my son, on the other hand, actually needs that to focus because he is autistic, but he also has ADHD. So that helps focus him so he knows where his gear is. So he absolutely needs it. I don't at the moment, but it was helping me. And so I kind of used that example to kind of make it more real. Like this, you might be helping people that you don't even realize you're helping. And
That's right.
students who may not be disabled, but just prefer that way of learning. And there was another one who was a student who was not a student identified as being deaf, however, wanted captions. And
Sure.
I asked the professor and said, I don't have accommodations, but can you enable the captions? And I, shared with the professor, like, well, here's why they're asking for that. I was like, captions help a lot of people. Some people just prefer them.
Yeah.
It could be an English as a second language student who just maybe that's how they're learning the language. Maybe it's a situation. Maybe I'm studying in the middle of the night and don't want to wake somebody up and I'm listening
Right.
to them.
Or I'm on the bus or whatever it may be. Yeah.
And, so, and then again, I use myself. I say, for myself, I am an English as a second language student. So that does help me. And sometimes some of my students, since we're talking about accents, Kelly, have heavy accents. And so for me, I needed the captions. And a lot of my professors didn't use captions. I had to use my own tool to kind of just follow along with the captions. Because unfortunately, my professors, I guess we're thinking, oh, you don't have an accommodation. So for my students, for my faculty and my research, it was really kind of showing them, don't wait till the students ask for an accommodation, because if you just do it for everyone, you're going to reach people who may not even have an accommodation or need that request, but it's going to benefit them. Like I make the joke, I've never heard anybody say it's too accessible. Like,
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
There's too much
Exactly.
to reach people. Like,
Yeah.
like, that's never
Too many ways in. Sure.
Yeah, too many ways in. Too many ways for me to access this information and actually
Right.
show you what I know. Like, how dare you?
Feel like I'm a part of it. There's too many ways for me to feel like I'm a part of this.
That's really but that's where the change happened, but it happened organically with my participants. Because it wasn't me just telling them, like, I had them actually correct their documents. And I explained, this is who's being affected. Like, I literally said, this is who's being affected. But when I started it, I did like a little activity when I said, okay, let me know if you've ever had this situation. I use situations like, have you ever not been able to read your phone because of the light? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, have you ever gone to an app and it didn't work or the links were too close together, right? And they're like, yeah. And so then I said, well, you know what? You experienced what we call a situational barrier. Because at that time, there was a barrier that was there that was preventing you from doing that. And they were like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Just kind of making them understand that there's a real connection when you make things accessible for one person, other people benefit. But that shouldn't be the reason we do it. Like, it should be like the argument. Because I think some people will be like, oh, well, that's, we'll make it accessible so everyone benefits. Yeah, everyone benefits, but when you're making something accessible, you are targeting that person who may be excluded, but you're also getting the benefit of getting people who may not say something, and it also helps them.
Right. It's like the residual.
And to your example about the images, we know that processing space can be challenging for
Yeah.
a lot of people. And so when you put that information in another format, it helps everybody, especially those people that, they don't have an identified disability, but maybe their spatial processing is not as good as it could be. It needs to be supported, right? So that they can do just as well as everybody else. So I love that, but I'm going to put you on the spot because this is a question that comes up a lot. And you mentioned that we can score accessibility, right? There's tools that will scan a document or a website and give us a score. Can something be 100% accessible, Dr. Torres?
No.
Mm.
And why not?
Because there's really no such thing as 100% accessibility because technology is always changing. People's needs are always changing. So what works now may not work, 10 years from now. And hopefully the technology evolves so that it's not the same. And so you
Right.
mentioned your camera that has a screen reader. That was not something that was part of
Right.
cameras. And now that is because that's a inclusive design. You get more customers because more people are going to buy your products when you're able to use it and navigate it and it's easier. But at the same time, that technology is going to change and someone else's needs might also change. And so it's always, so when people talk about like WCAG, which are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, where they say you have to be at this level, that's really the bare minimum that you can do. It's literally the floor, not the ceiling. Because there's always so much more that we can do to help somebody. There's always more that we can do to reach everyone in the room. But the reason those are important is we need to at least get to the minimum because so many websites aren't even there. They fail
Right.
at the very minimum of accessibility. And
Yeah.
again, if we're thinking physical locations, that's literally, I just have a ramp or something into a building. But there's so much more to accessibility than I just have a ramp. Does it have an elevator? Does it have braille where I can actually read where the offices are? Does it have a universal design space? Like there's so much more we can do. And the problem is like when we start focusing on those scores, then that, we see it as a grade. Like, oh, I've got the score, I'm good to go. It's a one-time thing.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's always evolving. And especially with teaching, like hopefully you're not teaching the same thing for 20 years the exact same way. Maybe it's the same material, like content, but hopefully something's changed in 20 years that you've got to change it up.
Right.
Students have changed. Like since COVID, we've had a lot more long COVID that's kind of been present and a lot more disabilities that became more apparent, like anxiety and
Right.
depression
Sure.
and things like that because of what that isolation did. And so
Yeah.
the nature of the audience has changed. Now people expect trainings to be virtual. Like when we do trainings, they'll ask, is it virtual? Like none of my faculty ever asked for that prior to COVID.
Right.
Right.
We always had face-to-face trainings. Now can that be a virtual training? Because now that's that space. And so
Yeah, we changed our setting, we changed our scenario, and like you have to
because
sit in.
it's possible. Now we're like, well, why do we have to go backwards?
Yeah, I love that, and I love this kind of like it's this idea that you have to marinate in it, right? And actually, by you saying that nothing is 100% accessible, I have to be honest with you, that is a relief to me. As a
should be.
person who doesn't always exist in the accessibility world, but is trying to, that is a relief because I don't have to strive for the 100%. Like I know that I'm making progress towards. And
Right.
then I know that there's this residual benefit that happens, and then I start to tie that all into my story, and then all of a sudden I understand now that not only am I an ally of accessibility, but I'm actually in this thing making it happen. I'm more than just a standby, or a passenger on the ride. I'm actually helping drive it, and so I can live with that. I can do that.
My participants as well from my research, because when they started, again, they were compliance, really thinking compliance. So they're thinking, oh, I gotta get a high score. And then I kept telling them, well, we're not chasing 100%. I said, and I even told them, the law doesn't even ask you to be at 100% because there's no such
That's
thing.
right.
They just want you to see that
Yeah.
you are doing progress over perfection, that you're, not staying stagnant, that you are trying to make, an effort, a good faith effort. Because I told them, you could do everything right and still have a student who says, I need something else, because that's
Right.
specific to that person's individual needs, or it might be specific to the disabilities that they actually have. But you eliminate a lot of it when you kind of just assume everyone has variability in your course. You're going to have people who have
Right.
different needs and different varying ways that they like to engage with content. So you kind of eliminated this need of I'll wait for the accommodations, because that's really what drove the change. Was too many people were being told you need to wait for
Yeah.
the accommodation, or
Right.
you need to wait until it's accessible. Well, if I need it now, I can't afford to wait. If I'm a
That's right.
student and that's a textbook I need, I can't afford to wait for that. If
Yeah.
this is a service that I need, maybe it's something I'm trying to purchase or something for my family, I can't afford to wait to meet because obviously I'm purchasing it for a reason. And so when we wait for somebody to say, oh, I need this or I have a complaint, you've already lost them by that point. They've already
Yeah.
experienced frustration by this point. They're kind of already fed up. And it's really kind of too late at that point because they've already feel like they've had to do more just to get the same thing as everyone else. It really
Yeah.
is a civil rights issue.
And their engagement goes down, right? Because we
Sure.
know that we try to practice universal design for learning, and we know that then when there are accessibility barriers and people have to work harder just to get to the same level of access as other people, then their engagement is not going to be as high. They're going to spend a lot more of their energy. But to your point about the scores, right? The metaphor that I use is you could have a stand-up comedy routine and you caption and say 96% of it is caption. And you're like, yay, but the 4% left out is the punchline,
Yeah.
right? So now you're
Okay.
missing out on like the important information. So I love the focus on, improvement and continuous growth over perfection because it is a standard, right? Like that we aim for, but it's really there to motivate us, right? To really
Mm-hmm.
push us to do more and more and get better and better.
That's right. And I think, as we say, like accessibility is a journey. And so like with Brian's like, I'm nervous. I'm glad I'm trying. I'm not 100%. And I think Wendy, you leaned in right out of the gate of our conversation when you were intentional by saying the barrier was not my learner, it was me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like that's been driving you this whole time and in your research, right? And I think as we all are on our accessibility journey, as long as we keep that in the forefront, thinking, okay, the barrier is not my learner, what changes do I need to make, right? We do the next right thing as we're trying to do making sure experiences are accessible. And I see that in your research, and I really liked how you approach your faculty within your research. And so I'm just thinking about, so you've done all this and you've had the faculty intentionally like discover things that they didn't realize, right? Oh my gosh, this is supporting these learners, and I had no idea. So I'm curious, like, where do you hope like the impact is going to help your learners and the users in the real world, so even outside of the classroom? And I know you shared some examples about some learners you've worked with and your faculty, but can you share some like very specific examples of how just designing for accessibility actually improves the experiences for our learners and users?
So, yeah, so when you design for accessibility, it does improve it for everyone. It just makes it better. For example, one of the favorite quotes I had from, I think his name was Lawrence Anger, if I'm going to butcher his name. But he basically said, when you're designing content, who are you okay with excluding? That's how he worded it. And I was like, ooh, that's really
That's
powerful.
Whoa.
powerful.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that's blunt. But it made a point because when we are designing, when we're creating content or we're sharing information, there's a reason we're trying to reach an audience. And if it's not accessible, you're not reaching that audience. And so if you're thinking from a business point of view, what customers am I not reaching? What capital is not being given to me because they can't use this product, right? If you're thinking from a teaching point of view, what students are missing that material because it's not accessible, right? And so like real world examples, like I said, I use myself as an example with the tools that I use just as somebody going back to school who had been in school for a while. It's different being an adult learner with, grown children and other responsibilities and trying to navigate full-time experience with being a parent with schooling. Like I had to remind myself like, oh, I need to now, things that used to be easy for me, I needed a little bit more help. And not because I couldn't do it, but it was because I honestly just didn't have the bandwidth. Like, okay, what can I do? So I was using these tools for myself just to make things easier for me to navigate. So for example, my faculty ended up, because it's a doctoral program, they share a lot of articles, a lot of research articles. And all research articles are in PDFs and columns. I am too daggone old to read in columns anymore. And so I found myself rereading the same thing over because my eyes just kept going that way. And so I had to use a tool where it just converted it straight up to HTML just so I can read it up and down. So it was the same materials, but I was just changing it so I can get the information easier. So that I could not concentrate so much on what is, trying to remember what that message this, I can actually look at the information and do it instead of trying to fix the formatting because you waste
Sure.
time. That's the main thing. When you're wasting time, you're exhausting energy that could be used for something else.
Sure.
So, for example, when we talk about alt text, it's absolutely critical for somebody who's visually impaired or has blindness because they need to know that information is important. So, for example, if you send out an event and it's just a picture, and there's nothing else, you're missing that, right? But what if it's something like, oh, class is canceled today, and you send out like a little flyer or something? Well, if I'm that blind student and I don't know that class is canceled, think about it. I have to take more time to get to campus, physically, to get to campus. So that takes more time and effort just to find out it's been canceled. But then what if you have somebody who maybe they're not disabled and they didn't check their email? They still spent time coming on campus and didn't get the message because it was an image and they thought it wasn't important. So those are two very real world examples. That something small really can have a big effect.
Well, I think that that's, we see that all the time, right? Like it is, you are able to focus on the more germane cognitive load, right? Like the thing that is looking for the mental outfit to process information, to build schemas of learning, those sorts of things, right? Like that is that's the cognitive load that we're looking to put most of our effort into. But when I can't access it, whether it be because like I'm having a hard time reading columns, or I am not seeing the picture, those extraneous cognitive loads or intrinsic cognitive loads those extraneous cognitive loads slow us down, right? And divert so much for our attention. And then they become intrinsic cognitive loads that it's like, what is wrong with me? What am I not doing right? How do I
Right.
have to find my way around this? And those external barriers then start to lead towards internal barriers when that was never the focus anyways, right? Like, so I love
Yeah.
how you frame that. I love how
Yeah,
you
that
frame that.
cognitive accessibility.
Hmm.
Yes, I love that.
You're a business, you're trying to reach people. If they're spending more time trying to access your website, they're going
Yeah.
to go to another service because they
Yeah.
don't have the time. You're
Mm-hmm.
telling them, oh, you don't value you don't value the power of my purse, so I'm going to take my purse elsewhere. I mean,
And
that's a
caregivers too,
no-brainer. That
right?
really is the driver.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and we often think of, we're going to talk about a few misconceptions, right? But you already mentioned one, which is that, oh, I don't have those students in my class,
You
right?
have
Yeah.
them.
Because you're
You have
focused on only the apparent disabilities or the apparent tools that you look for as indicators, right? That somebody has a disability as opposed to like those non-apparent disabilities, right? So that might be one that we've mentioned already. We also talked about like the fact that you can't have 100% accessibility as another one. But what are some other misconceptions? Like if you had to pick one or two that you still kind of hear a lot in your work with faculty and even with students, right? What are some misconceptions that you still hear?
I think the two main ones I hear, that people they think the disabled population is small.
Hmm.
It's
Mhm.
not. It's over 1 billion strong. And then it's also this idea that making something accessible is hard. It's so time consuming. It's going to be hard. Like, yes, there is some extra effort required, but when you make something accessible, like I tell my faculty, when you're make that content accessible, you're copying it over the next semester most likely. You're not most likely you're not remaking a whole course every semester. You might if you get a brand new course, but that's not typically what happens. Typically you're tweaking and changing some of the
Good
stuff
point.
with the subject matter being the same. Right? And so I tell them, you've already made it accessible once. And so once it's made accessible, you're not recreating it, you're just going with the flow and updating as it goes along. Like I said, not 100% accessibility, right? I'm updating it, I'm making it new and fresher in different ways to reach my students. So I think those are two of the main ones. And I think another one that I hear a lot, I think people, for some reason, think that disability is linear. Like, oh, you
Hmm.
only have one. It's like,
That's
no,
right.
you could have multiple disabilities and and they're all different. They could be like, for example, my mother, she's got multiple disabilities. She's got seizure disorder, she's got glaucoma, she's got arthritis, she has a mobility aid, and those are all different disabilities. They can all coexist together. Like,
Sure.
and then this
Sure.
idea that, that disability isn't part of an identity,
Hmm.
like I often hear people say, "Oh, you overcame the disability." It's like,
Right.
no, and I'll use my son. I'll be like, "No, he's still autistic." Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't magically just poof. Like, I'm no longer autistic. Like, it's part of who
Right.
he is. It is part of his identity. But it's not. everything about him. Like, yes, he's autistic, but he's also male. He's also black, Hispanic, all parts of who he is,
That's
and
right.
that's important.
Sure.
And I think people need
Sure.
to understand that intersectionality exists and can coexist.
Yeah, and it leads to that medical model, right? Like that medical model of like we're going to fix the disability. Like we're going to diagnose this thing, we're going to fix this, as opposed to there's a culture, this cultural and social model that exists that my
That's right.
identity is part of this. And it's important to have that part of my identity because there are good things about it. Like I know it's hard to tell, folks, and I've told folks on the podcast before, I got a bit of a neuro sparkle to me. You know what I mean? And like that's I be honest with you, like I don't think of it as a superpower. Oftentimes it's problematic, but there are times where like I really lean into that as part of my identity. Like in a crisis, yo, I've got a million things that like I can help with, right? And so like it becomes part of my whether good or bad, it stays within my identity, and
Right, it's still
it's not
part of
something to diagnose and medicate away. It's something that is
Right,
me.
and we can become disabled at any point in our lifetime.
Hmm.
We could be
Sure.
born disabled, we acquire disabilities later in life, we may have an injury, whatever happens. It's a way of being, like, it's not this terrible thing. I know for exactly, with my son, when he first got diagnosed, everybody treated it like it was this incredible tragedy. And I'm like, he's a child, he's
Yeah.
it's not a
Right.
tragedy. you know. And if you ask him, he'll say, I don't want to change who I am. This is part of who I am. This makes me unique. And I'm like, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
When he was younger, he was asking, like, why do people make such a big deal about me being autistic? I said, oh, that's because, sometimes people don't understand and they want you to act a certain way that they understand it. And he was maybe 7 or 8. And he goes, well, people are stupid. They need to change how they think. And I was like, you know what? That's blunt, but it's honest.
I
Because at
mean,
this point, he
yeah,
was like,
true.
why? Like, why are you wasting
Yeah.
so much energy
Yeah.
trying to change who I am when it's not bothering me? And it is part of who I am. Like, so I just, people need to understand that, it's not linear. You can become disabled at any point in your lifetime. It happens, and you don't stop living because you're disabled. Like, I think people
Yeah.
tend to be like, oh, if you have a disability, you're such an inspiration, but, some of the things that they say were inspirational are things everybody does, like going to the grocery store.
Yeah, you shouldn't be lauded for that. That should just be basics,
But people do that, like, oh,
I know.
you do this, and you're so special. Why? Because I'm buying food. Like, everybody has those needs. Like, being disabled doesn't make you exceptional. It makes
Well,
you
and if you put in accessibility, right? If you made it accessible, it wouldn't be a big deal.
Sure.
Like it wouldn't even
be an
stand
issue.
out.
Like, if I know where my food is, I can get in, get out, and not have to waste time, trying to find it. And I think that's one of the biggest myths, that they think that it's this separate thing, or that it's such a radical thing for somebody to be disabled and live. And it's like, no, you don't stop living because you're disabled. You
Yeah.
Right.
learn
And
to
to your,
do the best you can with what you have, and you move on. But the technology is the great equalizer that provides those tools to remove
Sure.
those barriers. But again,
and
the barrier isn't the disability.
that's the issue. And to your point, there's a saying in the disability community: you met one autistic person, you met one autistic person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Right on.
remembering that each of us has like a very unique identity that's shaped by experiences, by our bodies, by technology, by all of these things, right? And also the other saying from the disability community that I love is that we're all temporarily abled,
Exactly.
right? At some point in our lives, we'll need these devices, we'll need these
Yep.
supports, either because of age or injury, or we may just prefer them, right? So I think that's important to keep in mind as we go forward.
Yeah, and at the
So
same time, we have so many students, right? I work with a lot of students who maybe they've been maybe dyslexic, right? And so they will try to blend into the current culture because they feel like it's a problem and people are going
yeah.
to make fun of them. So the whole time, because their content's not been accessible to them, they have maybe behaviors, right? They're trying to fake it till they make it, and then it becomes this whole thing because they don't feel like that could be a part of their identity. And I think a big part of GAAD, just the awareness of it, that we can have those conversations. And I hope if you're listening that you're having conversations with your students or
Yes.
your faculty or or anything like that. It really does come to accessibility and just having those conversations that, again, it's not a superpower. It's just a part of who you are. And so many students, like, the stats of the dropout rates, because learners with disabilities have been bullied, made fun of, they don't think they're smart. But
Sure.
we know lack of intelligence, lack of knowledge does not mean lack of intelligence, right? And so for students have not been able to gain this, they're all feeling that way, and it's the results of that just makes me weep.
Well, and I think that's it. Like, you can't wear a mask forever, right? Like, you cannot wear a mask forever. And if you
Nor should you
exist,
have to.
right? And if you are a competent individual, but you exist in a world of consistency, and that's the only thing you exist in, and that's where your issue is, guess what? You'll never feel competent. And and so you'll always have to try and wear that mask or whatever it may be, right? Like I'm in particular thinking about like those hidden kind of disabilities or those hidden issues that we don't see, right? And then
Yeah, that's
you'll
kind of
feel
what
like
I
you
think in a
never
while.
succeed.
Like,
Yeah.
think about it. If you look at the statistics, about 60 to 80% of students will never disclose that they have a disability
Mm-hmm.
because it's very private and personal, and because we make this thing like, oh, you're disabled, that's a bad thing. No, it's not. It's okay. And so they won't disclose it. But think about it. Kelli, would you go up to a perfect stranger and just give them your entire medical history?
Right,
Yeah,
correct.
right? But that's what we're
Right.
asking our students, particularly when they go into higher ed. Before they can get accommodations, they have to present this whole proof. Are you really disabled? So that people can actually believe you that you're disabled. Like, why do they have to go through so many barriers just to get an accommodation, and an accommodation just to have so they can get the same information as everyone else? Like,
Right.
and again, that goes back to that medical thinking. Oh, this is something we have to fix. There's something
Yeah.
wrong.
It's
And so then
diagnosable.
those students, try to mask it and pretend and don't ask for help because they don't want to be made fun of. They don't want people to know that they may learn differently, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing,
Right.
And so I think that's one of the things that makes me sad as well. But that's why we fight to make it
That's right.
accessible and let people know because it's always somebody else until you're that person. That's
Right.
always
Exactly.
somebody else's kid or somebody else's issue until it becomes your issue or it affects somebody you love, and then you change your perspective. And I understand that, because again, I'm very transparent with my story, but it shouldn't take that. Like, I
Right.
should have been thinking about Antonio before that.
Mm-hmm.
But that does bring us back to this idea, though, Wendy, of brass tacks, right? Like, I understand accessibility, UDL, like access; those things are journeys, and you have to marinate in them. And I absolutely 100% stand behind that. But I've also been a teacher, right? That walks in, and I'm facing 30 students, or I'm facing 115 students a day, right? And so I that can sometimes be like, yeah, that's cool, but it's a little abstract for me. So just based on your research and based on your extensive knowledge, I'm just going to ask, like, what are the low floor, high ceilings changes a teacher can make that is like big impact that they can design for tomorrow that can give them, like at least some immediate data on their learner variability, if not just change some of their some of their practices for learners variability.
So we're gonna go real low tech here.
Right
So
on.
assuming they don't have any technology or technology resources
Mm-hmm.
available within that education space, typically teachers tend to do something where they're asking their students, how they learn. They're trying to, gauge your understanding. So just even if it's like an exit tickets, instead of one general exit ticket, everybody has the same prompt. You ask them, okay, how are you going to show me what you learned or understood? And then give them different options. Okay, you can write it if you want it. You can have a video if you prefer that. You can draw it. Because that's really low level. You're not asking them, is it a right or wrong answer? You're literally asking them, what did you understand? What didn't you understand? But you're giving them the freedom to pick how to express it. And you're going to learn a lot about your students just looking at that. Because you
I
might
love
have a
that.
student who can't write, like physically, right? Maybe the
Mm-hmm.
physical act of writing is hard, but you give them speech to text. Oh, I can type this all day. Or you may have that student who is extremely artistic, but when you ask them to express it, they can't really express it verbally. But you give them something to draw, they can explain it that way. Again, simply like with my son, like if you asked him when he was younger to physically write, you would get one sentence, and it wasn't because he didn't understand it. He also has bad dysgraphia, so his handwriting looks like a young person learning how to write. When I gave him
Sure.
speech to text, my God, he was giving me novels because it wasn't he didn't know it. It was because he was exhausted from having the energy of having to
Yeah, it
change
didn't have
words
to
and
stand his
format it and
way.
everything else. Whereas
Yeah.
I gave him that freedom. I said, okay, just tell me what you learned. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry, about punctuation. We'll take care of that later. Just what are you thinking? Oh, he was telling me everything because you changed the way. So you changed not the child, you changed the environment. Okay, well that didn't work. And that's a real easy thing you can do right now. Like,
But I have to say there's something more complex going on in there that I really admire, right? Like your original phrasing, Wendy, was how are you going to show me what you know? There is a permission set, an unspoken permission set that students already have, right? They just don't realize they have it, right? That is granted within that, right? It is the question of how are you going to take ownership of this and show me what you know. So there is, for that teacher that worries about culpability and that teacher that worries about like responsibility, there is an inherent responsibility in that, but there is this huge amount of freedom to say, wait a minute, you're going to leave it to me. You're going to give me the autonomy of task or technique to show that I know this. That's a huge acceptance piece. And that's a huge empowerment piece, and it's just a slight phrasing. I love that. I think that is just masterful, actually, in its questioning.
That's like a super low tech way you can do it
Mhm.
because
Right.
maybe it's a skit. Maybe that student, maybe they
Sure.
aren't very good at reading and writing, but you give them a skit, they can act it out and they can show you. Because at the end of the day, when you're teaching, you want them to understand the concept. And then, and so how did you get to this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm going to let you show. I'm going to let you instead of
show
telling
me
you.
how you got there, but not
Yeah.
necessarily my steps.
And then there's scaffolding within that, right? Like there's
I have
pieces of
one student
scaffolding.
Really drew, and it was an interesting drawing. Like he had arrows going everywhere, but it made sense to him.
Sure.
But for him, he was like, "Oh, this is how I got here," and it made perfect sense when he explained the drawing. But if I asked him to type what he wrote or use the specific steps, everybody has to do the same steps, I would lose him.
Yeah, that's exactly me. I see everything in schematics and I see everything in drawings, and I'm sure my co-hosts know that, which makes it hard to communicate. But if I can explain it, like I can show you a model, and that's how I see the world. And so it's like it's really beautiful to be able to be given that permission to be able to draw you the diagram or the model I see and then explain it out.
Yeah, I hear you,
love
Wendy,
that.
saying, what's the goal and how are we going to get there? We're all going
Absolutely.
to get there differently.
Absolutely.
Pretty much. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what we're doing for teaching, right? We're supposed to be, we're teaching them something for a reason. And when we give assignments, the whole point is to see what they've mastered.
Yeah.
But if you only have one way of showing them, oh, everybody has to do an essay, you're only going to get those students who are really good writers to show you what they know.
Right.
What about the students who struggle with writing? If you give them a different way, they're blowing you away with what they can do.
Got that right. This has been such a great conversation as we wrap up here. I don't want to stop.
It's another one. It's another one that's on fire. It's another barn burner,
know.
baby.
I know. So we want to be able to continue the conversation, have people know how to follow your work, Dr. Wendy. So how can people follow you? And we'll put all of your resources and all the things in the show notes.
So I'm active on LinkedIn. I share a lot of my resources. I have my websites on there. I'm also on Blue Sky. You guys can also share out my email if you want, and I'm happy to share. As Kelli would say, I'm not stingy with sharing the resources. I feel
Right on.
like when we're educators, it's the best compliment is I'm going to steal that or I'm going to borrow that and just not give it back because that's what we do as teachers. We borrow, we just don't give back. But I feel like, this isn't meant to be in a bubble, so I do look at the different accessibility tools, and I look at different websites, and I look at it from the perspective of a teacher and a student. And so I give resources for teachers and faculty and all that. So
That's
if
right.
there's something you want me to, I'm happy to come to places. I do virtual ones as well because, sharing is knowledge. And accessibility is a journey, and we're all on it. So why are we being stingy with it?
Love
That's right.
it.
They used to have that saying, steal, like Simon Sinek had that saying, steal like an artist, right? I think that we need to start giving it away like a teacher, give it away like an educator.
That's right. We're better together. Dr. Wendy Torres. Did I do it right?
Hey,
Good job.
come on now, Kelli,
Yay.
come on now.
All right, we're going to leave on that. So thank you so much. You have been a joy, and thanks for all the work you're doing.
Thank you. Have a great one. Take care.
As always, peace, love, and belly rubs, y'all.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Learning Experience Podcast. We are so glad you're a part of this conversation.
And if you like me and today's episode sparked some ideas or got your brain flowing, well, just remember there's so much more to explore out there.
And remember that CAST is leading the way when it comes to accessibility, workforce innovation, professional development, and research.
So visit cast.org to dive deeper. That's CAST.org, and keep learning with us.